periods of time. That's a common interpretation a lot of people take nowadays, because there's other passages that talk about, well, a day is unto God as 1,000 years is unto man, and 1,000 years unto man is a day unto God's. And 1,000 years at the time was sort of like a concept like infinity. It wasn't like a concept like a literal 1,000 days. It was or 1,000 years. It was a concept of like a huge, big, giant number. Like, we don't know how long that is. Like an age, a period of time. That's how scholars would interpret, at least when I learned it as a kid, when my dad used to do all these studies and stuff like that. And there were concordances that would say that too. It wasn't like it was strictly interpreted as one day. And I think you fall into a problem that when your children grow up, if you're teaching a literal interpretation of these religious texts or their scientific knowledge or something like that, and the children go up into adulthood and they go to school, they get educated, and now they're finding out, oh wait, there's actually evidence to show that the earth is like, what was it, 4.6 billion years, whatever it is, and the universe is like 13.8 billion years. There's evidence for that. But but if they've been taught from the beginning how they could like interpret their religious texts, and they're not going to have that conflict when they go to college, and they're not going to lose faith. And I'm not saying they shouldn't necessarily lose faith or change religious beliefs, but losing faith is a big deal to people. It brings a lot of pain and suffering to people. It can cause like tremendous life upheaval. It can cause them to lose contact with their family and stuff. So it's not necessarily a positive thing to lose faith. Now,
I agree. And I
yeah,
think as a person who deals with like trauma healing, and I'm doing social work right now, it's so important to care about humanity of people. And faith is a really important thing for people. I think it's the way that you teach faith. When you teach faith as this, absolutely unassailable space, well, guess what? It's in, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Taoist thought, but the idea in Taoism is this concept of be like the reed that goes back and forth. Don't be like the firm tree when the storm hits, because you're going to get struck down. But if you're the
right,
reed, you can adapt. So I think the way religion and philosophy should be taught is more adaptable, where you're like, okay, I have faith, I believe in God, or whatever, I might believe in other principalities and spiritual elements, but I can believe in this way where I don't need to be absolute. Because you're correct. If you take an absolute firm stance, then it can be attacked, and
right.
it can crumble, and that can really hurt people. And is that fair? And I think everybody has their own journey. Because I remember when you asked me the question, like, does it matter if I don't have faith? And I'm like, to me, I don't care. The point is, you have your own journey. Every human has their journey. Some journeys will have religion, some journeys don't, and they're all okay. You have to have the journey
Right.
that best makes you be the best human being you can be. And that's the important thing. I don't want people who are super religious that will use religion to hurt people. I rather them have no religion, and vice
Right.
versa. I'd rather have a person who says if they have no religion, they're going to hurt people. No, I want you to have religion. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I tell that to Christians who say like they wouldn't be moral without God. And like, then don't lose your belief in God. But
Yeah.
I want to keep it on the show. But so I don't think we know that much about Ben, but I think we know a little bit more about Muhammad. And I got a short clip here to play in his debate with Aaron, and we'll get to these comments. And I think we see some agreement, a little bit of disagreement, not really too much. Like, and Tyler brings up existential crisis gets easier the more you do it, though. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Anyways, let's go to
computer science. I accept that there is computer science. I do not accept that middle-aged or medieval fables about flying horses and guys who can talk to ants and other such bullshit. I don't accept that as science.
You see, now when you're talking about talking to ants, is there ability from people to talk to each other telepathically? Is that even remotely possible?
No.
Just out of no, there is no way for you to read or write thoughts,
right,
using technology.
Right.
And I can show you an article right now.
Using technology, perhaps.
Yeah, using technology.
But there's no way to transmit, especially when we're talking about ants.
But hold on. My question is it possible using technology?
Is it possible we could talk to ants?
No, the ability to move thoughts with technology.
To move thoughts?
Thoughts.
We can move thoughts a number of ways, but it's not possible to talk to ants.
You didn't answer my question. Is it possible?
He did answer his question, but anyways, that's Mohammed. Yeah, so that's Mohammed. To me, it seems like weird, like, 'cause this claim in the Quran is something about how ants communicate, or they says they talk to each other, and we have studies today that show how ants use pheromones and stuff like that. But if you look like an ant colony and how they all interact and work together to build these structures, and you're curious about an explanation for how they can actually, like, they must be communicating to each other in such a way to be able to figure out how to build this structure. It's not a farce. It's not a stretch to believe that they do communicate. And sure enough, we find out they do communicate at a certain level to be able to coordinate to build these structures. There's natural instinctual reactions, and there's pheromonal stuff where they work together sort of to build these structures. I'm not an expert on ants, but I don't know what you guys think about Mohammed and those type of arguments, and go to Max.
Yes, hello, is my sound okay? Because I have the fan on, it's really hot today.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't like Mohammed that much as a debater. And when it comes to these points, I kind of share Isa's thoughts that I'm fine with you having your faith. But when you come into our realm and try to reconciliate faith with science, that's when it gets a little bit murky. Because most of the times people do this, they get the science wrong. And that is not fair. And as Isa has said many times, it takes away from the text itself. It's not a scientific. If you want to take the moral values from it, that's fine by everyone. Have your faith, believe whatever makes you feel better or be a better person, whatever the motivation is, I don't really mind. But when you come and say, oh, yeah, we should believe this because this is scientific and it couldn't have been any other way. And off the bat, I can think of a couple of ways in which people could have known some of these claims that they make. That's when it gets a little bit tricky to me, and it gets me a little bit riled up, but in a good way, like excited. But yeah, I'm not too fond of Mohammed's debating strategies and etiquette, let's say.
I see this comment from Colorado Biker. It's nice to have you on stage last night, Colorado Biker. He says faith and science diametrically opposed to each other. And I don't necessarily know if that has to be the case. They seem to be within two different domains, not that they're in opposition to each other. It's when they do get in opposition to each other that you have to like find a way to remedy that dilemma between the two. But what do you think, Isa?
I don't think that I think I understand what Colorado Biker is saying, but I don't think they have to be diametrically opposed. I think we have to understand, this is the thing that if you see me as a debater, I take the position of plurality. I think religion has a plurality. There's a lot of mainline churches that don't have any difficulty with reconciling religion and science. So, and I understand that people have very strong feelings, but I think they're very emotional feelings. I think a lot of people have had a lot of trauma with religion, and they feel that religion is this horrible, evil juggernaut that's out to get you. But there's I think religion that is more, can be more like uplifting and supportive for people. I do a lot of work at I meet a lot of wonderful people at these places too. I do a lot of work at places where they feed the unhoused. A lot of faith-based organizations do this work. And I think it's a really powerful thing that can happen, that people can use faith to help and support their fellow people. And that's a big deal, and it's super important. And I think that's an ethical, moral thing. And I see a lot of people who are in from like the mainstream world, people who are doctors and lawyers and engineers, and they all participate in this because it's meaningful to them. So going into the arguments of Muhammad, I think I just don't understand this, because if you read the Quran, it sounds a lot better in Arabic, by the way. Lughat al-Arabiya. It sounds so much better in Arabic. It's poetry. It's like poetic, right? So it has a certain kind of rhyme scheme, and it sounds a lot better. But like when you translate to English, it doesn't work as well, I don't think, as a text. Even if you read like the Torah in Hebrew, it sounds better in Hebrew, in my opinion, when you read texts in their original languages. I'm a big aficionado of that. Like if I watch like a Spanish film, I'm gonna watch it in Spanish. I'm not gonna watch a dubbed English version of it, because I want the authentic experience of it personally. But the problem I have, sorry, it's a little tangent. The problem that I have with this experience is that he's saying, here's this spiritual story talking about ants, and now I'm going to try to make a biology argument about these ants. Why would you do that? The text, that's not the intention of the text. These ants are kind of like, there's a text where the King Solomon, or the Prophet Solomon for Muslims, he's called Nabi Suleiman, or Shlomo HaMelech in Hebrew. He's this protagonist, he's this hero that has a lot of powers. And it's actually interesting. I did a whole paper, an analysis of how he's changed from the Torah into the Quran. So you have the Torah, you have this text called the Targum Shani, and then you have the Quran, and you see that he gains more and more spiritual powers. Because in the original, in the Torah, the King Solomon functions, or the Prophet Solomon functions as, or peace of blessings, functions as a, kind of like this really powerful king, right? He doesn't necessarily have supernatural powers, but when you get to the Quran, he has the power over the jinn. The jinn are these kind of supernatural beings that are made out of fire, smokeless fire, and he also can talk to animals. So it's like real, and that's where we see a lot of like the ants come in and the kind of power through that kind of conversation. But it's a spiritual story. It's like when we're with Max on the reading the stories, the Greek stories. I'm putting out a plug-in for Max there. Reading the Greek stories, they have a spiritual narrative. They're trying to convey us something. And that's the same way that I think we should look at these spiritual texts. Let's not look at them as scientific textbooks, because then they face the scrutiny of being put as scientific textbooks. Why do that? Why shoot your spirituality? Why shoot your text in the foot? It's incorrect, I think, to do that.
Yeah. And the Colorado Biker sort of says that religion and science can work together, and have historically. Sometimes they've oppressed science, but however, faith, belief without evidence. Now, that depends on the Christian or the theologian. Faith is not always belief without evidence. Sometimes it's belief with evidence. So, to me, they're just talking about evidence.
And for the most part, the times I've spoken with or I've heard religious scientists, the one thing they tend to say is, when we go into the lab, we leave religion at the door. And that's perfect, because you can have your beliefs, you can have your spiritual guidance, but when we do science, that really doesn't have much place. It doesn't add anything to the scientific method. So that's one thing that I really like when I hear, yes, I am a Christian, or I'm whatever, and but when I go into the lab, I leave my beliefs at the door, and I think that's great.
Yeah, and I think we're already covering arguments for the Quran being scientific, argument against the Quran being scientific. But are there any good arguments for claiming the Quran is scientific?
Do you mind if I take a
Yeah.
stab? Okay, so I've actually studied this. So there are certain arguments. They're not arguments that I personally believe in, but they're arguments that people can use. So you have Maurice Bucaille, who did a whole book on Quran and science, something that folks should look into, because this is the argument for Quran and science, where there was a study that was done about a fly, and there's a hadith about this, a tradition, where the fly lands in the water. Half of the fly is a poison, and the other half of the fly is like an antigen to that poison. So the idea is, that you take the fly and you dip the fly into the drink and you pull it out, and that will make sure that the drink is not contaminated. I'll tell you my personal opinion about that. I understand that that may have been a tradition of the time, a spiritual tradition. For me, if it's like water, I'm just going to put the water and feed it to the plant. I don't need to drink that water personally. I can recycle it without drinking it, but that's one of the narratives that's used, is that they'll say this has been proven. There's also, I was talking in the debate space, you can, drinking camel urine was permissible, and you can say, well, there are some good effects from camel urine, I guess, in certain faculties. That's from the Hadith tradition that engages some things that may be complex, but you can kind of say that there's been research and there's been studies that these things can be good. I don't think that that's a great argument for science, but the thing is, they're saying, hey, there's these really strange things, but there are studies that show that there could be some positive effect. So that's an argument for like Hadith stuff. The argument for like the Quran, and there's another argument too of like embryology, but the counter argument to me is that you can use Greek philosophy, and you can look at the Greek philosophy of like Aristotle, the Greek science, like you can look at Aristotle and Aristotelian embryology, which is not perfect, but it seems pretty advanced for that time without having the same kind of mechanisms that we have now. So that, embryology is an argument that will be used. Now that it uses the argument about the vas deferens, about where semen is produced, he says that that's there. So like, wow, cool. There's these amazing things that work. So those are kind of the arguments that you're going to see. That you're going to see these things that are out of the time. They're like anachronistic. That's the argument that's going to be used, that they're anachronistic. You have this like really advanced anachronistic stuff that can be utilized for the argument. My counter argument to that would be, if I were to argue against it, if I were Ben, I would say, well, okay, these might be interesting things. First, it's vague. So you can't pinpoint it and say that that's literally what this means. Number two, if you're going to use scientific studies, these scientific studies may be more fringe. So why are we focusing on this fringe stuff to kind of prove this as being this concrete thing? That seems really bizarre as a space of trying to prove a scientific space. Also, and Dr. Wood and I have talked about this, if you're going to use that position, you're going to actually hurt the spiritual reading of the text. If you try to make it scientific, you're going to hurt the spiritual reading of these texts. So it's like, none of these arguments are really going to help you in positioning that. But that's my understanding in the whole spectrum of the narrative.
And welcome, Robin. But Julie asked, oh, my headset's about to die. What does it mean for something to be scientific? But this is a good question. I think this is totally related to the topic at hand. To me, scientific means we provide an explanation, the cause for why we do something. So if we observe ants building the community, right, we could hypothesize, create a hypothesis and say, well, maybe they communicate with each other in some way. The science is a process of testing that hypothesis and providing explanation for the mechanisms involved. The Quran doesn't do that. So to me, from the get-go, the Quran is not a scientific book at all. It doesn't provide the mechanisms. And some of the mechanisms it does provide, like how it created man, right, from black mud or something like that. Like, we know it's not true, but they'll like post hoc rationalize that to mean like we're made up of stuff. But I got to replace my headset. You guys can talk.
Yes, Robin, do you want to chime in?
Please, ladies first.
Okay. Well, we gave Robin a moment to set up. I do agree with a lot of what you said, Isa, and it gives me a lot of hope that even in a religion like Islam, that it is possible to find people like you who take what I think is a way better approach. And today I was hearing a debate with Dr. Bart Ehrman, one of my favorite scholars ever. And he was saying pretty much along these lines that it's fine to have the spiritual readings, and but even when you have those spiritual readings, it's not the best when you try to excuse, for example, contradictions or things that are not laid out in the best way, that you can still take the spiritual message and acknowledge everything that we find in all of these texts, which I find that like a really cool idea. And I've gone through this debate of the Quran is scientific on the modern day debate Discord. And yes, they bring up the Fly one, which they have sent to me a paper which has no citations, and I couldn't find any other reference to that anywhere else. There's one paper supporting this, and that's it. And then the one I really like is the one about the waters, that they don't mix, because yeah, it looks like that, but there's a constant mixture of the waters beneath the surface. That line is not a hard line. It's just something that happens on a surface level. But even within the line, within the surface of the water, there's a constant exchange of water. So that kind of defeats that. And what I do like about this debate is that when you take the scientific approach, the answers are very simple, very clear, because we've done a lot of the science that this says. In the case of, for example, the embryology claims, yes, one possibility is what you said, that they had some of this knowledge from the Greeks, but these people raised animals. So when you raised animals for a long period of time, you're bound to find miscarriages, or you're bound to find when an animal is slaughtered for consumption, you might find that it was pregnant and you didn't know it. And all of these things have better explanations than, oh yeah, this is a scientific miracle from God. And yeah, let's leave it there for now.
Maybe we can get into predictions. Muhammad, of course, is arguing for. Well, now it says, "Is Islam true?" So they changed it. They changed the name of the debate to "Is Islam true?" Okay, well, that's a different question now. What the heck? When did they do that?
Scratch the beginning of the show. We're starting over.
Well, I can engage. You want me to engage this conversation, this topic here?
Yeah, so I guess Ben will be
can y'all hear
arguing
me?
against the Islam being true. We can hear you now, Robin. Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, that's strange. They changed the name, isn't it? I wanted to go along with what Colorado Biker said. I don't really think that they have to be like direct opposition, but I believe that there's a truth factor that one seeks and the other doesn't. There either is a God or there isn't a God. That's you know, the law of identity say that it has to be one or the other.
You're breaking up a little bit there.
I'm sorry. But so that's the only thing I think. I think it really is an opposition of truth sometimes.
Yeah,
Can
there's
you hear me?
opposition there, I think. Yes.
But that doesn't mean we have to be, you know, opposed to believers. I just think at the foundation of it, though, one is seeking the truth, and maybe the other seeks the truth, but a lot of times they really seek, you know, either moral or give them comfort or whatever. But the truth is like not something that's at the top of the list of importance.
Yeah. You're breaking up, Robin.
I'm sorry, I'll get off here. I don't know what's
Level-
wrong. My headset's tore up, I guess.
Yeah, it's your headset, I think.
All right.
Level Earth, Hanifa, why was there a change in the debate topic? I don't know. I mean, we are doing the Quran scientific in 2 days or 3 days, 4 days. So maybe they realized that they had a typo or something. I don't know. So I'll change the name of this video. I think it could be related, but man, it's sort of like reset the whole topic. But I want to shout out to David for gifting out 5 memberships, to Charles Arnold, Dan Robinson, Jan, Ike K, Gregory Smith, and Maxime Lamoth. You all have new channel memberships and a bunch of emojis you guys can use in the chat. So feel free to do those. I think I can add new emojis now too, because we have like a bunch of members. Anyway, so is the Quran true? So I take it Ben will be arguing against that. Muhammad be arguing for that. I don't know how they're going to do that unless they're going to do like it's like is it true? What, because it says it's true?
I think in these cases, it's like I don't know where Ben stands on the fence, like if he's a Christian or if he's an atheist or what Ben is actually. But I think it's one of those that we usually get, probably atheism versus Islam or Christianity versus Islam. I mean, Islam is true. Like there is a religion called Islam. I don't know.
Well, Islam exists. So when somebody says Islam is true, they're saying Allah exists. Allah sent a message to Muhammad. Muhammad reiterated that message. That message was preserved correctly, and because Allah delivered the message to people that we can trust in a method that we can trust, that means by definition it must be true. So the fact that something exists, like the book Harry Potter exists, doesn't mean that Harry Potter is true. It'd be true it exists, not that the information in it is true. So when somebody says, is atheism true? They mean on the proposition that God does not exist. Is that true or false? That's what they mean. When somebody says, is Islam true? It's on the proposition that the text of Islam, the religion of Islam is true. Do you accept that claim is true or false? Not that it exists.
I think that there's an issue here. It's unfalsifiable. We can't prove if God is true or not. You either believe it or you don't. This is the funniest thing where people are like, you can live life that God doesn't exist, but you can't prove that God doesn't exist, and you can't prove that God exists. And I find it's just a bizarre question. I'm like, what do you prove? You're talking about a supernatural thing that's beyond out of space and time. How do you prove that's real? You know what I mean? How do you prove it's not real? We're humans. We can't experience it. You can always move the goalpost. So it's just, I don't know. It's a really bizarre space for me, philosophically speaking. But if we were to engage the points, like what will Muhammad argue for? I don't think it's really going to change very much. Remember when I said about Nader with, is Islam true? He did exactly what I said, right? He went to scientific. You could say Islam is moral. You could make, these are the types of arguments that you're going to make. Is it true? But the difficulty is, which form of Islam are we going to say is true? See, and that's debate. And it's funny because people say, is Christianity true? Well, what Christianity? What about if I'm a Unitarian Christian? Is that true? The Trinitarian is going to say, I'm not true, right? It's the same Islam. If I say, hey, I'm a promoter of Tasawwuf or Sufism, I say that's true. The person who says, well, the Salafi will say, no, you're not true. You're a heretic. So it's like it's a weird thing. And it's the same thing with atheists. Like you can have like a new wave atheist who will say, oh, you're not the real authentic atheist. It's this, what is the true person? It doesn't exist. It's not real. So I think these debates are fun, but I don't know if you're really going to get anything out of it. Ultimately speaking, you can't really prove either way on this, in my opinion.
I disagree with the general concept of theism versus atheism, but I could say like, oh, you're not a true naturalist or you're not a true secular humanist or something like that, because then you're positing something other than just one ontological claim of if God exists or not. So,
but everybody has that kind of stance. Like that's what I'm saying. People will take kind of what I'm basically assuming when I'm making the statement. It's not the argument about atheist, not believing in gods or a god. That's not my argument. I'm saying that people say, hey, there's this true thing that you need to be, right? And if you're not that thing, then you're out of the club. And I mean, even like with liberalism and leftism, you'll see that too, or conservatism.
Oh yeah.
You're not the true thing. You're not the right thing. And I'm like, this is the problem. And I don't know how you can argue, is Islam true? You saw in my debate how I argued, can the prophet be Muhammad be considered a true prophet? And I took a very liberal progressive base. My position wasn't to prove that Mormon prophet Joseph Smith is not a prophet. That wasn't my position. My position is, can he be a prophet? And I made this, and I think I made a fair claim. He can fit into this framework of being a prophet. So I won what I was trying to set out. The point is, if I had to say, is he the true only exclusive prophet, then that's a different position. But I wouldn't take that position.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the position you sort of have to take. But I do want to read this really quick from LA. The only way that you can say a religion is true is if the vast majority of its claims, including the key ones, are verified to be true, not just a select few of them, and no religion can do this. It depends on what you mean by proof and evidence. But
I was going to say something along these lines when you were speaking just now, that, okay, yeah, we can analyze the claims, and when do we determine that something is true? When it's 50% correct? When it's 65, 75, 95? If we were able to verify that everything that the Bible says is exactly right, except for the fact that Jesus wasn't born of a virgin and Mary was just a regular woman that had sex, wouldn't that, or I'm asking, would that defeat Christianity? Or will we just say, oh, we have all the other claims being correct, but this one, which is key, is false? How would we deal with that? So when we get into these conversations of, is this true, is this not, then we need to establish a criteria. And I don't think we can establish a good criteria to feasibly determine whether these things are true or not.
yeah, I would say it's physically impossible for somebody to be impregnated without sex. But if it was found out that she was impregnated through sex, they could say, well, God did that way on purpose, or the spirit that it's a spiritual father. It's not like a physical father. And and I don't know, they could, and that the son is a spiritual son that inhabited the physical body of Jesus that was produced between sperm and egg. You can always like find a way to provide apologetics for all these claims, so it really becomes unfalsifiable because they're not making a strong specific claim. Well, they do with that one, they will. So you could say, well, I would just reject that as being impossible. It's impossible to come back from dead, true death, stuff like that. I would say it's physically impossible. I'm not saying it's logically impossible. Just I would say it's physically impossible. So you need to show me a mechanism that makes it non-physically impossible or physically possible. And they can't do that to convince me, but I'm those are my ontological commitments, where other people could have different ontological commitments that make it a lot easier for them to justify these supernatural claims and to reinterpret it based upon the explanations we have with the real world. So is Islam true? I mean, based upon just like presuppositions, yes, you can create like a deductive argument that's valid to support your claim that Islam is true. Does that make the argument sound? No. But could you be rational? Maybe. I think yes. I think so. As long as there's no internal contradictions in the worldview. But rational doesn't necessarily mean it comports with reality and that is true. How could we ever know Allah exists, that he delivered a message to Muhammad that was true? They'll make these claims like the Quran is perfect, like perfectly literal, or a literary perfection, that it couldn't ever be duplicated. And it seems like another weird claim that they'll always, because a lot of these people memorize it. So you pull something out, like they're just going to know it's not from the Quran. That's not perfect. Well, what makes it perfect, dude? Perfect's all subjective.
I've taken on that challenge.
That's my position on it. It's subjective. So
Yeah.
that's
I've
a
taken on that.
Sorry.
That's sorry. Go ahead.
no, please.
Oh, sorry. I've taken on the challenge of trying to create a verse, and I was fortunate enough that I thought about doing it with ChatGPT, because every time I came up with something, they kept the one that was challenging me on this particular thing kept moving on the goalpost, and he said, "Well, you're doing it with ChatGPT." It's like, yes, mainly because if I had done all of this work by hand and you just kept on moving the goalpost, I would be a lot more frustrated than I am now. Because right now I just type in a few things and I get what I want from the AI. But what I want to do is hone in on exactly what you want, get your challenge passed by the computer, and then I can feel confident enough to do it myself. But there's always something extra. And when I arrived at kind of the final version of this text that was written in the style of the Quran, and it was basically an ode to strawberries, they told me, "Oh wait, there's you need to put the ring composition into the text," and then they sent me a video on what the ring composition is. So I mean, these challenges, they're designed to be like that, and as Isa said, they're subjective. How can you compare a text and say this text is better than this one? It's that's not how we quantify texts.
Yeah, I agree.
Really quick, LA. I think I said that. Are we sure that it was actually changed or just a title mistake? It might have been a mistake because, like I said, in 4 days on February 4th, I got a debate with Nadir on is the Quran scientific. So maybe somebody had some confusion. It didn't make sense to me. But look, we have flat Earth debates day in and day out sometimes too. And somebody said, "Do we ever make any progress?" I don't know. I think so. Maybe.
We do.
But I think a lot of this is unfalsifiable. That's my position. You know.
Yeah. So it's not scientific because it's unfalsifiable.
And we're coming up on the time, so if you see that we shut down, it will redirect to the debate, right, Tosin?
Yeah, so I got the redirect set up. I'll post a link to the chat or to the debate as soon as it starts, and I'm watching it now. I'll actually refresh this to make it L8 says flat earth debates are net loss for humanity. I'll post a link to the debate, but we will redirect you as soon as the debate starts. I'm watching it now, so you won't miss any of the action. They're always a little bit over time or don't start right at the minute they say they will, because they got to get everybody prepped and stuff like that. But if you do like the content, please like, share, subscribe to this video, become a channel membership. If you want to, that'd be awesome. Help us out. You can send me tips. It's in the description, but because I'm doing this for like work now, or trying to, not really for work, but I can't work right now. But that's okay. But with that being said, what else? Who do we think is going to win? Let's go around. Max.
This is
Ben
hard.
Mohammed.
I don't think I can call who is going to win because I don't know Ben at all. What I do think is that Mohammed is going to lose. Yes.
What about you, Isa?
Oh, and we have Samir here too.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to say. I've heard Mohammed's arguments.
Oh, sorry, guys. The debate's starting. But thank you for Samir. Be sure to come to the after show, and then we'll see. Really quick, who do you think, Isa?
I'm gonna say undecided. I'm going with.
I'm undecided too. What about you, Samir? Really quick.
I believe that no one is going to win because no one is going to succeed in converting the followers of the other.
Okay. All right. With that, we're going to go. We'll see you at the debate, guys. Come back for the after show. Thank you. Bye-bye.